3 years after the car accident, I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau with my wife, Shan Ruabing, the captain of the traffic police, holding a dark red divorce certificate in my hand. She looked at me in confusion and asked, "Is this because I saved Jiangcheng first during the accident and left you behind?" I met her eyes, nodded calmly, and for the first time, panic flashed across her face. It was early spring in Jiangcheng, and the wind still carried the last bite of winter. The rough texture of the divorce certificate pressed against my fingertips, reminding me of the self-respect I had slowly worn away throughout our 3 years of marriage. A sharp cramp twisted my stomach, followed by a dull ache from my fractured ribs. It had been 48 hours since the accident, yet I still hadn't gone to the hospital. I had only stopped by a pharmacy to buy a couple of painkillers because, at the scene of that terrible crash, my wife hadn't even looked at me once. "Lin Xiao, let's talk." Her cold voice came from behind me. I stopped and turned around. Shan Ruabing stood there in her neatly pressed dark blue police uniform, looking as commanding and distant as ever, as flawless and untouchable as polished porcelain. Her sharp eyes could spot every lie from a traffic offender, yet somehow they had never noticed the blood-soaked bandages hidden beneath my shirt. "We already got the certificate," I said quietly. "What else is there to talk about?" She frowned, that familiar look of superiority returning to her face. She clearly wasn't used to hearing me speak so calmly. In her mind, I was still the man waiting at home in an apron, always gentle, always patient, always willing to give in. "You're still throwing a tantrum?" she said, stepping closer, her voice filled with tired impatience. "Is it really just because I saved Jiangcheng first and left you there?" I looked at her beautiful face, but it suddenly felt like I was looking at a stranger. "Yes," I answered softly. She froze. She had obviously expected me to argue, beg for an explanation, or accuse her through tears. She hadn't expected such a simple answer. "Lin Xiao, be reasonable," she sighed, as though she had finally figured out the problem. Her voice shifted into the familiar tone she always used when lecturing me. "Do you know how dangerous the situation was? Jiangcheng's car was hanging over the guardrail. He has severe anxiety, and the river was right below. If I hadn't gotten him out first, he could have had a complete breakdown. As for you, the airbag protected you. You only had a few scratches. You could still get out of the car and walk around. You're a grown man. Can't you be a little more generous?" I lowered my eyes to the cracked tiles beneath my feet, where yesterday's rain still lingered in the gaps. The walking around she mentioned only happened because, when the truck crashed into us, I had turned the steering wheel with all my strength, making the driver's side absorb the full impact. As metal screamed and twisted around us, I used the last bit of consciousness I had left to unbuckle my seat belt and crawl out of the wreckage, just to make sure she was alive. Covered in blood, I staggered toward her. But the heroic traffic police captain was already kneeling beside Jiangcheng, holding him tightly as he trembled on the ground, whispering comforting words to him. She never even looked in my direction. "Generous?" I repeated with a bitter smile. "Shan Ruabing, do you know that's probably the nicest thing you've ever called me in these 3 years?" Her expression immediately turned cold. "Lin Xiao, don't be sarcastic. I know you're upset. Jiangcheng just came back from overseas. He has no one here in Jiangcheng. He's an old classmate, so of course I'm going to take care of him a little more. As for the divorce, calm down for a few days. Then we'll come back and get remarried. My family can't manage without you. My father depends on you for his medication. And you're the one who takes care of all the household chores better than anyone." I stared at her as if I had never truly known her. In her eyes, my value as a husband was nothing more than being a convenient housekeeper for the Shan family and a personal nurse for her father. "There's no need," I said. I turned my back to her and looked across the quiet square outside the Civil Affairs Bureau. "Shan Ruabing, 3 years ago your father saved my life. I've already repaid that debt by working for your family like a beast of burden. From this moment on, I don't owe you anything, and I don't owe the Shan family anything." "Lin Xiao, stop right there." Shan Ruabing's voice rose sharply, filled with anger at being defied. Just then, a silver-white Porsche screeched to a stop outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, its tires screaming against the pavement. The door opened, and Jiangcheng stepped out carrying a bouquet of bright red roses. He wore a perfectly tailored designer suit, his hair styled with care, and a faint, almost invisible smirk played across his delicate features. "Ruabing, is everything finished?" he asked as he walked over, naturally taking his place beside Shan Ruabing as though he belonged there. The moment he noticed the divorce certificate in my hand, a flash of satisfaction crossed his eyes. "Brother Lin, I'm really sorry. Because of me, things ended up like this between you and Ruabing." His voice sounded sincere, but at the same time, his hand casually rested on Shan Ruabing's shoulder. "Ruabing was only doing her job. She's a police officer. Protecting people and saving lives is what she's supposed to do. But you, how could you force her into a divorce over something so small? A man with such a petty heart will never get far in this world." Shan Ruabing didn't move his hand away. Instead, she looked at me coldly, as if expecting me to apologize to Jiangcheng or ask for her forgiveness. I stayed silent. I simply stood there, quietly watching the two of them. The pain in my chest grew worse, and I knew the internal bleeding was getting more serious. My vision blurred for a moment, but I refused to bend. For 3 years, I had endured everything. For 3 years, I had buried the real Lin Xiao, the man who had once dominated the business world and made countless rivals fear him, hiding behind the mask of an ordinary husband. I had done it all because, on his deathbed, old Master Shan had held my hand and whispered, "Lin Xiao, Ruabing is proud by nature. Please take care of her." But now that final wish meant nothing. "Lin Xiao, Jiangcheng is talking to you," Shan Ruabing said, her frown deepening. "Where are your manners?" I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I'd had in 3 years, cold enough to freeze the air. "Manners are for people, not animals." Jiangcheng's face immediately turned red. He stepped closer and lowered his voice so only I could hear. "Lin Xiao, you're nothing but a useless stray dog now. Without the Shan family backing you, you won't even be able to survive in Jiangcheng. Leave while you still can. Otherwise, I'll make sure you disappear from this city." I turned to look him straight in the eyes. "Really?" I asked, my voice frighteningly calm. "Then let's see which one of us disappears first." Shan Ruabing noticed the tension between us and immediately pulled Jiangcheng back. She looked at me with open disgust. "Lin Xiao, you've completely disappointed me. I thought you were just ordinary, but I never imagined you'd become this extreme and narrow-minded. Jiangcheng's company is about to sign a partnership with the world-class Xiaolong Group. His future is something a man who only knows how to cook and buy groceries could never understand. Leave now before I arrest you for interfering with a police officer performing official duties." I didn't even bother looking at her again. I turned around and slowly walked toward the intersection outside the Civil Affairs Bureau. Every step felt like my lungs were on fire. Shan Ruabing stood on the steps, watching my thin, lonely figure disappear into the distance. For reasons she couldn't explain, her chest suddenly tightened. For the past 3 years, no matter how late she came home, I had always left the lights on and a bowl of hot soup waiting for her. But now, the man walking away looked so cold and determined that it felt as though he intended to erase every trace of those 3 years from his life. "Ruabing, forget about him," Jiangcheng said gently, tugging at her hand. "He's only acting like this because he knows you're soft-hearted. Come on. I've already reserved your favorite French restaurant. Let's celebrate your freedom." Shan Ruabing took a slow breath, forcing down the strange sense of panic rising inside her. "Let's go," she said. Just as they were about to get into the car, a deep, powerful engine roar echoed from the nearby intersection. It wasn't the sound of an ordinary sports car. It was the intimidating growl of a top-tier armored engine. As an experienced traffic police captain, Shan Ruabing instinctively turned toward the sound. A convoy of black vehicles rolled across the plaza in an imposing formation. 3 black armored Hummers led the way, while a customized Rolls-Royce Phantom sat protected at the center. The silver spirit of ecstasy on its hood reflected the sunlight with an icy gleam. It was a sight no one had ever seen before. The convoy slowly pulled up to the curb, blocking Jean Ku's Porsche. He was about to lose his temper, but the moment he noticed the black and gold license plate on the Rolls-Royce, he froze. Cold sweat ran down his back. That license plate belonged to the highest level of elites from the capital. Under Shan Ruabing's stunned gaze, the door of the Rolls-Royce in the center of the convoy opened. An elderly man in a black tailcoat stepped out. His hair was streaked with gray, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. Ignoring everyone around him, he walked straight toward the slightly disheveled man standing by the roadside. That man was Lin Xiao, the same person Shan Ruabing had just dismissed as nothing more than a mediocre burden. The old man stopped 3 steps in front of Lin Xiao. Then, before everyone's disbelieving eyes, he bent deeply at the waist until his back was almost parallel to the ground. "Young master, this old servant arrived late. Please punish me." His voice wasn't loud, but in the quiet plaza, it landed like a thunderclap. Lin Xiao, who had been standing with his shoulders slightly slumped, slowly straightened his back. The dullness disappeared from his eyes, replaced by a deep, razor-sharp gaze, like a sword finally drawn from its sheath. In an instant, every trace of the meek, obedient husband was gone. He accepted the black trench coat the old man handed him and casually draped it over his shoulders, covering the blood-stained shirt beneath. "Uncle Sue, did you bring everything?" His voice was no longer soft. It carried the calm authority of someone who had spent years giving orders. "Yes, young master." Uncle Sue respectfully presented a dark gold ring. "This is the seal of the president of the Jiangcheng branch of the Xiaolong Group, along with the authorization to unfreeze every asset under your name." Lin Xiao took the ring and slowly slipped it onto the middle finger of his left hand. Then he turned his head. From more than a dozen meters away, his cold gaze landed on Shan Ruabing and Jean Ku, who were still standing on the steps. At that moment, Shan Ruabing felt as if an invisible hand had wrapped around her throat. She had never seen eyes like that before. There was no warmth, no resentment, only the detached indifference of someone looking down at ants. "Ruabing." Jean Ku's voice trembled. Is that really Lin Xiao?" The bouquet of red roses slipped from his hands and scattered across the ground as the wind carried the petals away. Shan Ruabing couldn't answer. She could only watch as Lin Xiao stepped into the Rolls-Royce and the massive black convoy drove away like a receding tide. Only after every vehicle had disappeared did she realize her hands and feet had gone ice cold. "Lin Xiao, who are you?" she whispered to herself. Meanwhile, inside the quiet back seat of the Rolls-Royce, Lin Xiao leaned against the soft leather, his face so pale it was almost transparent. "Young master, your complexion doesn't look right." Uncle Sue noticed through the rearview mirror, and his voice immediately became urgent. "Are you hurt?" "During the car accident," Lin Xiao said quietly. Shan Ruabing thought it was nothing more than a few scratches. He closed his eyes. A thin line of blood slowly ran from the corner of his mouth. "Take me to St. Mary's Hospital. Notify Gu Qingyan. Starting today, cut off every source of funding to the Shan family. And investigate Jean Ku." "Understood, young master." Outside the window, the scenery of Jiangcheng blurred by. Lin Xiao knew this was only the beginning. His counterattack for dignity, power, and everything that had been taken from him had finally begun. The 3 years he had spent enduring humiliation were never a sign of weakness. They had been 3 years spent gathering enough strength to destroy everything standing in his way. Now the king had returned. Everyone who had owed him, humiliated him, or betrayed him would repay every single debt with their own hands. Jiangcheng City Public Security Bureau. Traffic Command Center Monitoring Hall. The room was dim, illuminated only by dozens of enormous surveillance screens glowing with a cold blue light. Shan Ruabing stood in front of the main control console. Under the glow of the monitors, her dark blue police uniform looked even colder than usual. Her face was pale. Ever since what happened outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, she couldn't stop thinking about the moment Lin Xiao stepped into that Rolls-Royce. The image replayed again and again in her mind, tightening around her heart like a thin steel wire. "Captain Shin." Technician Xia Wang cautiously broke the silence. We've recovered the high-definition road surveillance footage from the day of the accident, along with the cloud backup from the vehicle's dash cam. Shan Ruabing took a deep breath. Her voice came out slightly hoarse. Play it. The screen flickered. The footage rewound to that rainy night, 48 hours earlier. On the screen, Lin Xiao was driving their second-hand domestic SUV, with Shan Ruabing sitting in the passenger seat after finishing her shift. The rain poured relentlessly, making it difficult to see the road ahead. In the passenger seat, Shan Ruabing sat with her head down, replying to Jiangcheng's messages. She never noticed the heavy truck speeding out of the side intersection, swerving wildly toward them. Just before the truck slammed into their SUV, Lin Xiao reacted with unbelievable speed. Without a moment's hesitation, he spun the steering wheel 1.5 full turns to the left. Shan Ruabing's pupils shrank. As an experienced traffic police captain, she knew exactly what that maneuver meant. When a collision couldn't be avoided, the driver had deliberately sacrificed the driver's side, leaving the passenger with the strongest part of the vehicle and the safest point of impact. Boom! Even through the surveillance footage, the crash was deafening. The driver's side of the SUV crumpled instantly. The windshield exploded into countless shards that flew through the air like bullets. On the screen, Lin Xiao's head slammed hard into the side airbag. Blood burst from the wound, soaking his white shirt within seconds. Shan Ruabing's fingers tightened around the marble countertop until her knuckles turned white. The video continued. She watched as Lin Xiao, after lying unconscious for several seconds, forced open the badly deformed driver's door and stumbled out. His right arm hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. Yet he acted as though he couldn't feel the pain. Step by painful step, he crawled toward the passenger side, trying to pull her, still unconscious, from the wreckage. Then another vehicle appeared in the footage. Jiangcheng's silver Porsche. He screeched to a stop, rushed over, and wrapped his arms around the now-awake Shan Ruabing. She remembered everything that happened after that. The moment she regained consciousness, the first person she saw was Jiangcheng. Looking terrified, he claimed he had nearly fallen into the river trying to save her. Meanwhile, only a few meters away, Lin Xiao stood quietly in the shadows, his face covered in blood. The surveillance showed him slowly walking toward her. Then it showed her pushing him away. She said something with obvious disgust. Thanks to the enhanced audio, she could now hear every word she had spoken that day. Lin Xiao, stop getting in the way. Go check the car. If anything happens to him, can you take responsibility? On the screen, Lin Xiao froze. His hand, which had been reaching toward her to check if she was hurt, stopped halfway. It trembled slightly before slowly dropping back to his side and slipping into his blood-stained pocket. He didn't say another word. He simply stood there in silence, like a complete stranger, watching the woman he loved hold another man. Captain Shen, should I keep playing? Technician Xia Wang spoke quietly, not even daring to look at her face. Shan Ruabing drew in a shaky breath. Turn it off. She spun around and walked out of the surveillance room, her steps noticeably unsteady. For 3 years, she had always believed Lin Xiao was nothing more than a weak, spineless man who depended on the Shan family for a comfortable life. She had even pitied him. When the wealthy, charming, and confident Jiangcheng returned, her heart had naturally leaned toward him. She had convinced herself that Lin Xiao had escaped the accident with nothing more than a few scratches. But the truth was that he had used his own life to protect hers. And in return, she had rewarded him with a slap across the face. Lin Xiao, she whispered to herself. How many more things have you been hiding from me? Without another thought, Shan Ruabing drove straight toward St. Mary's private hospital. Right now, all she wanted was to find Lin Xiao. Whether it was to confront him, apologize, or make things right, she didn't even know anymore. St. Mary's private hospital was the most prestigious medical facility in Jiangcheng. Its VIP rooms were charged by the day. Every nurse received international etiquette training, and only the city's wealthiest and most powerful people could afford treatment there. The moment Shan Ruabing entered the VIP waiting area, she heard a shrill voice echoing down the hallway. Lin Xiao, you ungrateful, heartless bastard. Get out here. Do you really think hiding in an expensive hospital means I can't find you? Where did you get the money to stay in a place like this? Did you steal the deed to our Shan family house and pawn it off? Shan Ruabing's heart sank. It was her mother. Mrs. Shan stood at the entrance to the VIP corridor with an Hermes handbag hanging from her arm, one hand on her hip as she loudly caused a scene. Several security guards stood nearby looking helpless. They wanted to remove her, but none of them dared offend a woman who so obviously carried herself like a wealthy socialite. Mom, what are you doing here? Shan Ruabing hurried over and grabbed her mother's arm. Ruabing, perfect timing. Mrs. Shan immediately grabbed her daughter's hand. Her face twisted with anger. That useless loser actually dared to divorce you. Fine. Let him go. But he actually had the nerve to hide private savings. Mrs. Shan shouted. Look at this place. This is St. Mary's Hospital. One night stay here costs more than our family spends on food in half a year. He's lived in our house for years, eating our food and drinking our water. Even the socks he wears were bought by you. So where did he get this kind of money? Mom, stop it. Lin Xiao was seriously injured in the car accident, Shan Ruabing said, but her voice lacked conviction. Injured? Mrs. Shan sneered. I think he's just pretending. He's trying to squeeze money out of our Shan family. Not a chance. Today I'll make him return every cent, and he'll apologize to Jean Ku. Jean Ku said that if Lin Xiao hadn't jerked the steering wheel that day, his car never would have spun out of control. Just as Mrs. Shan was about to storm into the VIP ward again, a calm, icy female voice echoed through the hallway. Mrs. Shan, since you enjoy talking about money so much, our legal department has quite a few bills we'd like you to look over. Shan Ruabing looked up. A woman in a dark gray business suit walked toward them with measured steps. She wore gold-rimmed glasses, and behind her followed 8 muscular bodyguards dressed in black suits and sunglasses. Every step they took carried an overwhelming sense of authority. It was Gu Qingyan, executive chief of the Jiangcheng branch of the Xiaolong Group, and the first sharp blade at Lin Zhao's side after his return. And who are you? Mrs. Shan snapped, glaring at Gu Qingyan with open contempt. She was used to getting her way at home and didn't bother hiding it. Who gave you the right to interfere? I'm Lin Zhao's mother-in-law. I'm disciplining my family's live-in son-in-law. What business is that of yours? Gu Qingyan stopped 3 steps in front of her. A faint mocking smile appeared on her lips. First, she said calmly, Mr. Lin has already ended his marriage with Ms. Shan Ruabing. Legally, you have absolutely no relationship with him anymore. She adjusted her glasses, and her expression turned cold. Second, over the past 3 years, Mr. Lin secretly provided the Shan family's company with an interest-free loan totaling 380 million yuan. He also paid off the underground casino debts you accumulated. Every transaction has been documented. She paused before adding, if you continue causing trouble here, Mr. Lin has instructed us to demand immediate repayment of the full amount, including interest, within 3 days. Mrs. Shan's face instantly turned white. Her lips trembled. Why? You're lying. What loans? That's all because our family knows how to do business. Knows how to do business? Gu Qingyan let out a cold laugh. She took a file from her assistant and slapped it against Mrs. Shan's face with a loud smack. 3 years ago, the Shan Corporation was already bankrupt. If Mr. Lin hadn't mobilized his global capital network to keep it alive, your entire family would be begging under a bridge by now. She pulled out another document. And here's another one. The 10 million yuan you lost in Las Vegas last year. Mr. Lin paid that debt for you as well. Shan Ruabing stood frozen. She had always believed the Shan family's business had flourished because of her late father's connections and her own influence as a police captain. She had never imagined that the man who quietly cleaned the floors, cooked every meal, and drove her to and from work had been silently holding up the entire Shan family behind the scenes. You. Mrs. Shan pointed at Gu Qingyan with trembling fingers. You must be some woman Lin Xiao is keeping on the side. You're here to trick me. She raised her hand to slap Gu Qingyan. Smack! A sharp sound echoed through the hallway. But it wasn't Gu Qingyan who was hit. Gu Qingyan caught Mrs. Shan's wrist with one hand and, without hesitation, slapped her hard across the face. The force spun Mrs. Shan around before she crashed onto the floor. She clutched her burning cheek, completely stunned. "Mom!" Shan Ruabing cried out and rushed forward. Before she could reach her mother, two bodyguards stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Captain Shin." Gu Qingyan looked down at her with eyes as cold as ice. "Out of respect for the fact that you were once Mr. Lin's wife, I'll give you one piece of advice. Some people, once they're gone, are gone forever. Mr. Lin's patience has already run out. If the Shan family dares to bother him again, I won't hesitate to make the Shan Corporation disappear from Jiangcheng completely. I want to see him." Shan Ruabing ignored her mother completely. She looked straight at Gu Qingyan, desperation filling her eyes. "Please, let me see Lin Xiao." For the first time, there was something close to pleading in her voice. Gu Qingyan fell silent for a moment, as though she were listening to instructions coming through the earpiece she wore. A few seconds later, she nodded. "Mr. Lin says Captain Shin may come in alone." Then she glanced at Mrs. Shan, who was still sitting on the floor, screaming and throwing a tantrum. "Throw her out." Lin Xiao's voice was calm but absolute. "From today onward, St. Mary's Hospital is off-limits to the Shan family. Dogs included." "You... how dare you?" Mrs. Shan shrieked. Before she could say another word, two bodyguards lifted her up as if she weighed nothing and carried her toward the end of the hallway. Shan Ruabing stood there in a daze before quietly following Gu Qingyan toward the VIP ward. With every step she took, the weight in her chest grew heavier. Every 5 meters along the corridor stood a fully armed security guard. The level of security was no less than what the mayor of Jiangcheng would receive. When they reached the innermost presidential suite, Gu Qingyan stopped. "Mr. Lin is waiting for you inside." Shan Ruabing slowly pushed the door open. Standing before the massive floor-to-ceiling windows was Lin Xiao. He wore a loose hospital gown beneath a black leather coat. His back faced her. His right arm was wrapped in a thick cast, while his left hand casually flipped through a document written entirely in English. Around him stood 6 or 7 elderly doctors dressed in white coats. Shan Ruabing recognized one of them immediately. Dr. Herman. Her eyes widened in disbelief. He was the world's leading brain specialist, a legendary physician who had personally treated presidents and heads of state from several countries. Yet now he stood before Lin Xiao with his head slightly bowed, respectfully delivering his report. "Mr. Lin, your internal bleeding is mostly under control. However, the broken rib penetrated too deeply into your lung, so you still need plenty of rest. Also, regarding the global medical port project you mentioned, we've already prepared a preliminary plan." Dr. Herman spoke with complete respect. Lin Xiao closed the document without even turning around. He simply raised his left hand slightly. The doctors immediately understood. Without saying another word, they quietly filed out of the room, not one of them even glancing at Shan Ruabing as they left. The room fell silent. Warm sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing Lin Xiao's shoulders. Yet somehow the room felt colder than ever. "Have a seat, Captain Shin." His voice was calm. There was no happiness at seeing her again. No satisfaction from getting revenge. Only the detached politeness of someone speaking to a stranger. Shan Ruabing walked over and looked at his pale, sharply defined face. She opened her mouth several times, but the words refused to come out. Finally, she managed to ask the most meaningless question possible. "Does it still hurt?" After a long silence, Lin Xiao turned to look at her. His deep, unreadable eyes remained calm. "You watched the surveillance footage?" Shan Ruabing lowered her head. She couldn't meet his eyes. I did." "Lin Xiao, why didn't you tell me? If you had told me the money came from you, if you had told me you turned the steering wheel to save me, so what?" Lin Xiao cut her off. A trace of self-mockery crept into his voice. "So I could tell you everything, and then ask you to choose between saving me and saving Jean Ku?" He looked at her quietly. "Shan Ruabing, You graduated at the top of your class from the police academy. Your instincts and judgment shouldn't be this poor. Her face instantly lost all color. Jiangcheng, she whispered. He said he was terrified. I saw him shaking. He had every reason to shake. Lin Xiao let out a cold laugh. He picked up a USB drive from the table with his left hand and tossed it gently in front of her. That's the traffic trajectory of Jiangcheng's Porsche before the collision. Captain Shin. As a traffic officer, take it back and study it carefully. Tell me, why would a perfectly normal car suddenly swerve toward the guardrail when there wasn't a single obstacle on the road? And why did it stop at exactly the right angle to make him look like he was about to fall into the river? Without actually going over the edge? Shan Ruabing's head snapped up. Are you saying he did it on purpose? Whether he did it on purpose is something you can investigate yourself. Lin Xiao's voice remained calm. But one fact is certain. The truck that caused our accident belongs to a transportation company that received a massive overseas wire transfer just half a month earlier. The source of that transfer was the same city where Jiangcheng studied abroad. Lin Xiao slowly stood up. Although he was still recovering, his tall frame, standing nearly 6 feet 1, radiated a quiet pressure that made Shan Ruabing instinctively tense. He walked over to her. With his left hand, he gently brushed the badge pinned to her police uniform. Shan Ruabing, you've worn this uniform for too long. It seems you've forgotten one simple truth. The hardest thing to judge in this world is the human heart. You believed Jiangcheng was your savior. But in reality, he may simply be a madman using you to take control of the Shan family, or to get rid of me. Impossible, Shan Ruabing whispered. Jiangcheng, he wouldn't dare, but even she could hear the uncertainty in her own voice. Whether he has the guts or not, Lin Xiao said calmly, you'll have your answer at tomorrow night's Jiangcheng business banquet. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and spoke in a distant voice. You can leave now. I'm tired. Shan Ruabing looked at the man who had once been so familiar to her. He was sitting only a few feet away, yet it felt as though an impossible distance separated them. Lin Xiao, she asked quietly, is there really no way for us to go back? Lin Xiao didn't even open his eyes. A faint, cold smile appeared at the corner of his lips. Shan Ruabing. The moment we walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, we became people from two different worlds. He paused for a moment. Oh, and tell your mother something for me. Don't come to St. Mary's Hospital looking for trouble again. Next time, Gu Qingyan might not stop at slapping her. She might destroy the entire future of the Shan family. When Shan Ruabing walked out of the hospital room, she felt as though every ounce of strength had left her body. The afternoon sunlight flooded the hallway, but all she could feel was a biting cold. Just as she stepped toward the elevator, her phone vibrated. Jiangcheng was calling. Ruabing, where are you? He asked excitedly. Tomorrow night's banquet is going to be incredible. I specially ordered a gown worth over 1,000,000 yuan for you. We'll be the center of attention. I heard Mr. Lin will be there too. I'm confident I can win him over. Listening to Jiangcheng's cheerful voice, Shan Ruabing suddenly felt sick to her stomach. Her fingers tightened around the USB drive Lin Xiao had given her. Her eyes slowly sharpened. The truth was unfolding piece by piece. Everything she had believed for the past 3 years was collapsing under the weight of Lin Xiao's cold, undeniable evidence. The Jiangcheng Peninsula Hotel. Its magnificent golden ballroom was the very center of power in Jiangcheng. Every inch of polished marble seemed to carry the scent of wealth. Tonight, the city was hosting a high-profile charity business gala. But anyone with any sense knew the charity event was only an excuse. The real reason everyone had gathered was because of one man, the mysterious Mr. Lin, the hidden force controlling the Jiangcheng branch of the Xiaolong Group. Tonight, he would personally choose his first strategic business partner in Jiangcheng. Shan Ruabing stood on the second-floor balcony overlooking the ballroom. She wore her special security uniform, the tactical belt around her waist emphasizing her slim but disciplined figure. As the officer in charge of security for the evening, her sharp eyes constantly scanned every corner of the venue. Yet, despite herself, her attention kept drifting toward the Shan family gathered in one corner of the first-floor lobby. Her father, Shan Ruabing, wore an overly eager smile as he moved from one influential guest to another, desperately trying to make conversation. Watching his humble, almost desperate behavior filled Shan Ruabing with an uncomfortable bitterness. The Shan family's company was truly in trouble. For years, it had survived only because of Lin Zhao's secret financial support. Now that he had withdrawn every cent after the divorce, the illusion of prosperity was falling apart at an alarming speed. "Chairman Shan," someone said with a mocking smile while raising a wine glass, "I heard your company's cash flow has gotten pretty tight lately. If you don't secure Mr. Lin's investment tonight, you probably won't even have enough to pay next month's interest." Another businessman laughed. "That's right." Shan Ruabing rubbed his hands awkwardly and forced a smile. "Not at all. Not at all. My daughter Ruabing is very close to Jean Ku from the Jean family. Jean Ku has already spoken with Mr. Lin. I'm confident the Shan family will receive the investment tonight." Not far away, Jean Ku stood surrounded by several wealthy young heirs from influential second-tier families. Dressed in an expensive sapphire blue suit, he casually swirled the champagne in his glass, enjoying the attention. "Young Master Jean," one of them said with a grin, "when you meet Mr. Lin later, don't forget to say a few good words for us." "No problem." Jean Ku smiled proudly, soaking in everyone's admiration. His eyes drifted toward Shan Ruabing on the second floor before sweeping across the ballroom, clearly searching for another opportunity to show off. Just then, a small commotion erupted near the entrance. I stepped into the ballroom. The plain clothes I used to wear were gone. In their place was a perfectly tailored jet black suit that fit me flawlessly, emphasizing my tall, commanding figure. My right arm was still recovering, remaining slightly stiff beneath the sleeve. But nothing could hide the quiet authority I carried. It was the natural presence of someone who had spent years standing at the top. Even the security guard at the entrance hesitated for a moment before remembering to check my invitation. Ignoring the curious stares around me, I walked calmly toward the VIP lounge. Well, a mocking voice suddenly rang out. "If it isn't the Shan family's former live-in son-in-law, Lin Zhao." Jean Ku, surrounded by several of his followers, immediately walked toward me like a pack of hyenas spotting fresh prey. Jean Ku looked me up and down before letting out a mocking laugh. "Where did you rent that suit?" he sneered. "It must have cost you a fortune." "Lin Zhao, don't tell me you actually think that just because you're divorced and wearing a decent suit you suddenly belong in this circle. The price of a ticket to tonight's banquet is probably more than what you spent on groceries during your entire 3 years with the Shan family." Hearing the commotion, Shan Ruabing walked over. The moment he saw me, his expression darkened. "Lin Zhao, what are you doing here?" he snapped. "Haven't you embarrassed the Shan family enough? Get out before you offend the distinguished guests who are about to arrive." I looked calmly at the man I had called Dad for the past 3 years. Now, all I saw in his eyes was open contempt. "I'm here," I said evenly, "to take back what's mine." "Yours?" Shan Ruabing scoffed. "Everything the Shan family owns was earned through our own hard work. You were nothing but a kept man. What could you possibly have that's yours?" Before he could say anything else, Mrs. Shan appeared. The swelling from the slap she'd received at St. Mary's Hospital was still visible beneath the thick layer of foundation she had used to cover it. The makeup only made her face look even more twisted. "Oh, I get it now," she shouted. "You heard our family is about to become rich again, so you've come crawling back hoping to remarry Ruabing. Let me tell you right now, dream on." I ignored her completely. Instead, my eyes drifted toward the second floor. Shan Ruabing stood behind the balcony railing, staring at me. Her eyes were filled with shock, confusion, and a trace of panic she hadn't even realized herself. "Young Master Jean," one of Jean Ku's followers said with a grin. "This stray dog snuck in without an invitation. Why don't we have security throw him out?" Jiangcheng adjusted his bow tie with exaggerated confidence before raising his voice so everyone nearby could hear. But since Brother Lin wants to experience high society, I'm willing to be generous. He smiled arrogantly. Lin Xiao, kneel down right here. Admit that you're a thief who stole from the Shan family. Promise you'll never bother Ruabing again. If you do that, I'll reward you by letting you stay after the banquet to wash everyone's wine glasses. How does that sound? Laughter spread through the crowd. Lin Xiao. Shan Ruabing could no longer stay where she was. She hurried downstairs and stopped in front of me. Her voice was low, filled with conflict. Just leave. This isn't your place. Jiangcheng has already built connections with Mr. Lin's people. He really will humiliate you. I looked at her, and a cold smile slowly appeared on my face. Captain Shen, are you worried that I'll embarrass myself? Or are you afraid I'll destroy the perfect life you've built? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just then, the massive rosewood doors at the front of the ballroom slowly opened. The entire hall instantly fell silent. Xiao Chongshan, the president of the Jiangcheng Chamber of Commerce, entered first. Normally, he appeared on television with the confidence of a man who feared no one. Tonight, however, he walked with his back slightly bent, respectfully leading a group of distinguished guests inside. He's here. Mr. Lin is here. Jiangcheng's eyes lit up with excitement. He hurriedly straightened his suit and pulled Shan Ruabing forward. Ruabing, Uncle Shan, hurry. Come welcome Mr. Lin with me. This is the moment that decides the Shan family's future. Shan Ruabing was practically dragged to the front of the crowd. Xiao Chongshan stepped onto the stage and stood behind the microphone. His expression was solemn. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to welcome Mr. Lin of the Xiaolong Group. Mr. Lin has returned to Jiangcheng to personally select the group's strategic investment partners. Now, please welcome Mr. Lin to the stage. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward the entrance, but no one appeared. Instead, Xiao Chongshan slowly scanned the room. His gaze finally settled on a quiet corner of the ballroom. On the man who had just been mocked by everyone. On the man the Shan family had been trying to drive out. Without hesitation, Xiao Chongshan hurried through the crowd. The ballroom became so silent that even breathing could be heard. He stopped directly in front of me. Then, before everyone's horrified eyes, he bent into a perfect 90-degree bow. Mr. Lin, everything is ready. Please come to the stage and preside over tonight's event. For a brief moment, the entire Golden Hall seemed to lose all sound. Jiangcheng's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It shattered across the marble floor. The wine splashed across his $1,000,000 suit, but he didn't even notice. His eyes bulged as if they were about to fall out. His lips trembled uncontrollably. Shan Ruabing's hand remained frozen in midair, still stretched out for a handshake that would never happen. He looked like a statue. As for Shan Ruabing, felt as though her entire world had exploded. Everything she believed to be true collapsed in a single instant. Lin Xiao, the man who had washed her clothes every day, the man who made her hangover soup, the man she had dismissed as ordinary, mediocre, and lacking ambition, was actually the mysterious master of the Xiaolong Group, a man capable of controlling the fate of an entire city with a single command. Without sparing the stunned crowd another glance, I calmly adjusted the cuffs of my suit. As I walked up the marble steps one by one, each crisp footstep echoed through the hall like a hammer striking the hearts of the Shan family. I took the microphone from Xiao Chongshan and stood beneath the spotlight at the center of the stage. A moment ago, I said, my voice calm, someone asked what I came here to take back. My eyes slowly swept across the crowd before settling on the Shan family. The icy look in my eyes was enough to make Mrs. Shan nearly collapse on the spot. 3 years ago, I accepted a mission and concealed my identity within the Shan family. I gave your family countless opportunities to rise to the top, but it seems you preferred living in your own fantasy. I reached inside my suit jacket and pulled out a dark gold folder. It was the investment proposal the Shan family had exhausted every connection trying to secure. Jiangcheng had proudly claimed it was already guaranteed. I looked toward him. His face had turned deathly pale. His legs gave out beneath him and he collapsed to the floor. His throat moved as if trying to speak, but no words came out. Right before the eyes of Jiangcheng's business elite, I calmly tore the proposal into pieces. The shredded paper drifted through the air like a delayed funeral. From this moment forward, I announced, every company in Jiangcheng connected to the Xiaolong Group is forbidden from conducting any business with either the Shan family or the Jin family. Anyone who disobeys will become my enemy. Shan Dihai's entire body shook violently. His breathing became ragged before he collapsed into Mrs. Shan's arms. I placed the microphone back on its stand and turned to leave the stage. Lin Xiao, Shan Ruabing's voice, choked with tears, cut through the silent ballroom like shattered glass. She pushed past the bodyguards, rushed to the foot of the stage, and looked up at me with red, tear-filled eyes. You lied to me all this time, didn't you? You watched me running around like a fool. You watched me desperately trying to save the Shan family's business. You stood behind me, coldly watching me fall into the abyss. Did you enjoy it? I stopped. Looking down at her from the stage, I answered calmly. Shan Ruabing. 3 years ago, I gave the Shan family a chance to change its destiny. My voice remained quiet, but every word carried an icy weight. It was an exclusive authorization for a major trade agreement. If your family had signed it, the Shan family would already be the most powerful family in Jiangcheng. I paused. But the day I brought the contract to your father, you were out celebrating Jiangcheng's birthday. Your father didn't even bother opening it. He threw it straight into the shredder and called me a useless dreamer. Shan Ruabing froze. She desperately searched through her memories. Slowly, she remembered. From that day on, I continued. I realized the Shan family never deserved that future. Without another word, I walked past her toward the backstage control room. Lin Xiao, stop. She cried out desperately behind me. You saved my life. I've already learned the truth. But you can't destroy the Shan family like this. I never turned around. It wasn't me who destroyed the Shan family. It was their own greed, their ignorance, and their arrogance. Inside the monitoring room, Gu Qingyan was already waiting. Young master, we've finished tracing the activity in Jiangcheng's private accounts. Just as you predicted. Before tonight's banquet, he secretly met with a senior executive from the Shan Corporation. They discussed illegally transferring the Shan family's core technology. She paused before continuing. And we've also uncovered what happened to the opportunity from 3 years ago. It turns out Shan Dihai never ignored the contract. He secretly switched it out. Then he sold it to the Shan family's biggest competitor. He used the money to pay off his gambling debts. I stared at the surveillance screen. On it, Shan Dihai's face was filled with fear and despair. My expression remained cold. Shan Ruabing always believed her family was simply ordinary. What she never realized was that the rot had reached the very core. I lit a cigarette and watched the smoke slowly rise before the bank of monitors. Notify Han Ling. The legal process begins tonight. I don't want Jiangcheng leaving here with only his pride wounded. I want him leaving in handcuffs and spending the rest of his life wearing chains. Understood, young master. On the surveillance screen, the ballroom had descended into complete chaos. Shan Ruabing sat helplessly at the foot of the stage. Meanwhile, Jiangcheng was quietly trying to slip out through a side exit. I crushed my cigarette into the ashtray. The real performance was only entering its second act. Jiangcheng City Traffic Police Brigade. Interrogation Room 3. This was once the place where Shan Ruabing ruled with unquestioned authority. Here she had been known as the Ice Queen, the symbol of discipline, the embodiment of justice. But today, the atmosphere inside the interrogation room was suffocatingly heavy. The 8 words painted on the interrogation room wall: leniency for those who confess, severity for those who resist, stood out under the harsh white lights. I sat in the shadows across from the interrogation table, wearing a dark cashmere coat, my fingertips lightly tapping the cold tabletop. To my left, Jiangcheng was handcuffed to a reinforced interrogation chair. His once immaculate suit was wrinkled beyond recognition. Cold sweat streamed down his temples, dripping onto the table until it formed a small puddle. "Ruabing! Ruabing, save me!" he shouted desperately toward the one-way mirror. "This is all a misunderstanding. Lin Xiao is framing me. He's making up evidence." He screamed because he knew Shan Ruabing was standing behind that glass. I ignored his desperate shouting and looked instead at the man beside me, who was calmly organizing a stack of documents. Han Ling. In legal circles, he was known as the Butcher. He never accepted a case unless he was at least 99% certain he would win. And when Han Ling made his move, his opponents didn't just lose their cases. They usually ended up behind bars. "Young Master Lin," Han Ling said in a calm, emotionless voice, "the chain of evidence is complete." He slid a thick case file across the table toward Jiangcheng. "Mr. Jin, based on the evidence we've collected, the traffic accident 3 days ago was not an accident. 1 week before the collision, you transferred 2 million yuan through an offshore account to the wife of the truck driver. In addition, 3 days before the crash, your Porsche's braking system was professionally modified to ensure that, during a high-speed collision, the vehicle's dash cam would automatically activate its victim protection recording mode. Legally, this constitutes insurance fraud and attempted murder. You're lying." Jiangcheng's eyes turned bloodshot as he shouted. "I did everything to save Ruabing. I'm the hero." The hero? For the first time since entering the room, I stood up. I walked over to him and leaned down until our eyes met. The warmth that had once been in my eyes was long gone. Only a cold darkness remained. "Jiangcheng, your biggest mistake was underestimating my patience and overestimating your own intelligence. You really thought that night's rain could wash away every trace of what you did? You never knew that every high-definition traffic camera on that stretch of road had been upgraded 6 months earlier by one of the Xiaolong Group's technology subsidiaries. You believed you had chosen a blind spot, but under our infrared surveillance, every move you made was as obvious as a clown performing in broad daylight." I slowly turned toward the one-way mirror. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly enough for the person standing behind the glass. "Captain Shen, would you like to keep watching?" The interrogation room door slowly opened. Shan Ruabing walked inside. Each step looked painfully heavy, as though she were walking barefoot across a field of knives. She held a newly delivered internal memorandum in her trembling hands. Her face was paler than paper. "Lin Xiao, the provincial department just contacted me." She looked at me with eyes full of confusion and fear. "They said the 5 major unsolved cases I solved over the past 3 years were only cracked because a mysterious expert panel secretly provided the core technical support. And now, that panel has withdrawn all of its authorization records. My 5 first-class and second-class merit awards are all being reviewed again." She drew a shaky breath. Her voice trembled. "That expert panel, it belonged to you too, didn't it?" I didn't answer. I simply looked at her. My expression remained cold. "Why?" Shan Ruabing finally broke. She slammed both hands onto the interrogation table. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "You're clearly this powerful. You could have stood beside me in the open. You could have fought alongside me. So why? Why pretend to be useless? Why watch me like I was some kind of joke? Why let me accept honors that never belonged to me? Were you just enjoying yourself? Watching your own wife dance in the palm of your hand? Did that make you feel accomplished? Honors that didn't belong to you." I let out a cold laugh. Then I looked straight into her eyes. "Shan Ruabing, when you were drinking red wine at the celebration banquet, when your colleagues surrounded you with praise, you locked me outside the venue. You said your husband only knew how to buy groceries. You said I smelled like cooking oil. You said I'd only embarrass you. Did you ever stop and ask yourself where those achievements really came from? I pointed toward Jiangcheng. My voice grew even colder. When you mocked me in the hospital, when you chose to believe this man, the man who carefully planned a murder, did you ever think about one thing? If I hadn't spent the past 3 years quietly shielding you from every open attack and hidden scheme aimed at the Shan family, your reputation as the police department's golden officer would have been buried beneath your family's mountain of debt long ago. Shan Ruabing staggered backward, nearly losing her balance. For 3 long years, everything she had believed about her life was collapsing before her eyes. She had always believed she was heaven's favorite, the rising star of the police force. She believed Lin Xiao wasn't worthy of her, that he was ordinary, weak, and lacked ambition. But the truth was completely different. For 3 years, Lin Xiao had quietly placed all of his brilliance behind her. He had remained in the shadows so she could stand in the spotlight. He had been her shield, her protector, and with her own hands, she had shattered that shield. Jiangcheng. I shifted my gaze away from Shan Ruabing and looked at him instead. Now it's your turn. Jiangcheng shrank back in terror. Lin Xiao, you can't kill me. This is a country ruled by law. He desperately turned toward Shan Ruabing. Ruabing, save me. I did everything for you. I only loved you too much. I just wanted you to see that I was more useful than Lin Xiao. Love. I snapped my fingers. Han Ling immediately switched on the multimedia projector. The screen didn't show footage of the car accident. Instead, it displayed a series of secretly recorded videos from Jiangcheng's time overseas. In the video, Jiangcheng sat with a seductive foreign woman in his arms, casually swirling a glass of red wine. His face was filled with arrogance and malice. That woman from the Shan family is nothing but a tool. Once I get rid of the Shan family, take Shan Dihai's technology patents, and eliminate that useless live-in son-in-law, Lin Xiao, Shan Ruabing won't have anyone left to rely on. She'll have no choice but to obey me. Once I've transferred all the Shan family's assets, I'll leave the country. By then, who will even remember who she is? On the screen, Jiangcheng burst into loud, crazed laughter. The interrogation room fell completely silent. Shan Ruabing stared at the video as though she had been struck by lightning. The man she had believed was her soulmate, the man she trusted more than anyone, had only seen her as a stepping stone, a disposable pawn. I looked at Jiangcheng. This is your idea of love? I paused before continuing. As for the Shan family's technology patent, 3 days ago, Shan Dihai mortgaged it to me for 5 million yuan, just to pay off his gambling debts. In other words, the thing you spent so much effort trying to steal is now sitting in my trash. No! Impossible! Jiangcheng collapsed into his chair. His eyes were completely empty. Uncle Shan promised me. Oh, and there's one more thing. I leaned closer and whispered into his ear. You thought your overseas investments were making you rich? The financial advisor managing every one of those investments works for me. So not only are you going to prison, you also owe the Xiaolong Group 300 million yuan. Because of the joint guarantee you signed, even if you die behind bars, your family will spend generations trying to repay that debt. Jiangcheng let out a heart-wrenching scream. Foam appeared at the corners of his mouth before his eyes rolled back. He fainted on the spot. Take him away. I waved my hand. Several black-suited bodyguards entered alongside the supervising officers waiting outside. They dragged Jiangcheng out of the interrogation room like a lifeless dog. Soon, only Shan Ruabing and I remained. She stood there in silence. The police uniform she had once worn so proudly now seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. She couldn't even lift her head. Lin Xiao. I was wrong. At last she broke down. Tears streamed down her face, washing away her makeup until she looked completely defeated. Please, give me one more chance. I don't want those honors anymore. I don't even want the Shan family. Let's get married again. Let's go home. I'll cook for you every day. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for the 3 years I failed you. I slowly walked toward her. Then I raised my hand. For a brief moment, hope returned to Shan Ruabing's eyes. She closed them with trembling anticipation, waiting for the gentle touch she remembered so well. But my hand never touched her face. I simply reached out and straightened the crooked collar pin on her police uniform. Captain Shin. My voice was calm, without the slightest trace of emotion. This uniform no longer belongs on you. You illegally accessed surveillance footage for Jiangcheng. I've already submitted a formal complaint to the inspectorate. As an ordinary citizen, and as the victim, I'm exercising my legal rights. I demand a fair investigation. Starting today, you're no longer the captain of the traffic police. You're simply a public official under investigation. Her eyes widened in disbelief. You're destroying my career with your own hands? I looked at her quietly. It wasn't me who destroyed your career. It was you. I turned and walked toward the door. The black trench coat behind me swept through the air like a cold shadow. The moment you chose to save Jiangcheng, you destroyed the last piece of love I still had for you. Now, I'm only taking back everything that was never truly yours. Lin Xiao. Shan Ruabing screamed desperately behind me. How can you be so heartless? I didn't look back. Heartless? If I had truly been heartless, I would have let go of the steering wheel the moment the truck hit us and let both her and Jiangcheng die in that crash. I walked out of the traffic police brigade headquarters. The cool evening air washed over me. Outside, Gu Qingyan was already waiting beside the car. She handed me the latest report. Young master, Shan Dihai's villa has already been surrounded by debt collectors. 10 minutes ago, the court officially froze and seized every property, vehicle, and company share belonging to the Shan family. She paused before continuing. And we've fully restored the video containing old Master Shan's final wishes. I accepted the tablet. The screen lit up with the familiar face of the kind old man. The recording had been made 3 years earlier, just before his death. Young master, Gu Qingyan said softly. Old Master Shan's final words may not have been what you always believed. I stared at the screen. My fingertips trembled almost imperceptibly. Take me to the Shan family's old mansion. My voice was calm but cold. That's where everything began. And that's where everything will end. The Shan family owed me far more than 3 wasted years. Far more than silent endurance. The truth buried beneath the excuse of repaying an old favor had finally come due. Rain in Jiangcheng had never been reasonable. It had started the previous night. By evening, instead of easing, it only became heavier. Huge drops hammered against the glass curtain wall of the Xiaolong Group headquarters. The constant pounding sounded like thousands of war drums echoing through the city. I stood on the top floor, nearly 300 meters above the ground, in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. This was the highest point in Jiangcheng. Looking down, the city's neon lights blurred beneath the rain, broken into countless shimmering fragments. Once, I had believed Jiangcheng was a vast city, large enough to hide 3 years of my ordinary life. Now, it seemed incredibly small. Small enough that, with a single decision, I could erase entire families from its map. Young master, Gu Qingyan approached quietly, carrying a cup of freshly brewed black coffee. The ceremony begins in 10 minutes. All the guests have arrived downstairs. Every influential figure in Jiangcheng's political and business circles is here. They all want to witness the coronation of the city's new king. I accepted the coffee. The warmth of the porcelain cup spread through my fingers. But my eyes never left the rain-soaked streets below, where the crowds looked like ants from this height. Is she here? I asked without turning around. Gu Qingyan hesitated before answering. Yes, she is. This afternoon, the Shan family's old mansion was officially sealed. Shan Dihai has been taken into custody on charges of illegally transferring technology patents and long-term involvement in underground gambling. Mrs. Shan caused a scene outside the estate, but several creditors eventually took her away. She lowered her voice. As for Shan Ruabing, She's been standing outside in the rain for 3 hours. A faint, cold smile crossed my face. I said nothing. The most important thing, Gu Qingyan continued. She's wearing the wedding dress from your wedding 3 years ago. It's old now. It's completely soaked. But she's kneeling at the main entrance of the company. No matter who tries to persuade her, she refuses to leave. I took a slow sip of the bitter coffee. This bitterness lingered on my tongue. Wearing a wedding dress to beg for forgiveness. I shook my head almost imperceptibly. Shan Ruabing, you've become exactly the cliché you once looked down on. 3 years ago, you thought that dress was nothing more than chains keeping you from flying. And now, you cling to it like the last rope keeping you alive. I gently placed the coffee cup on the table. Let her come upstairs. My voice was as cold as the rain outside. I'll meet her on the rooftop terrace, at the highest point in Jiangcheng. It's time to give this ridiculous past the funeral it deserves. The wind howled across the rooftop terrace. When Shan Ruabing finally appeared before me, I almost didn't recognize her. The proud, distant captain of the traffic police, the woman who always wore her spotless uniform with confidence, was gone. Standing before me now was a soaked, exhausted woman. Her once beautiful white wedding dress had turned gray beneath the rain. It clung heavily to her body, dragging across the wet ground like a worn-out rag. Her hair hung messily over her face. Her delicate features had turned pale, almost purple, from the freezing wind. She staggered forward, barely able to keep her balance. Behind her, the eyes of Jiangcheng's most powerful people silently watched every step she took. The ceremony had been set up on a fully transparent observation deck. From every direction, countless eyes watched. Some were filled with mockery, some with pity, others with eager anticipation. They were all staring at the woman who had once been known as Jiangcheng's untouchable goddess. Lin Xiao. Shan Ruabing's voice was nearly drowned out by the wind. She staggered toward me, each step marked by the dull splash of her rain-soaked shoes. I stood beneath the awning with my hands behind my back. Not a single drop of rain had touched my black suit. The contrast between us couldn't have been more cruel. Lin Xiao, I beg you, please spare the Shan family. Suddenly, her legs gave out. She fell heavily to her knees 5 meters in front of me. Even through the roaring wind, the sound of her knees striking the concrete echoed across the rooftop. I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. I shouldn't have taken everything you did for granted. I shouldn't have left you behind during the car accident. She sobbed uncontrollably. Rain and tears mixed together until it was impossible to tell them apart. Tell me what you want. As long as you'll let my father go. As long as you'll give the Shan family a chance. I'll do anything. She suddenly looked up. Desperation had replaced every trace of pride in her eyes. I'll resign from the police force. I'll stay home every day like I used to. I'll have children with you. I swear. I'll listen to you for the rest of my life. Please. Give me back the Lin Xiao I used to know. All right. I looked at her calmly. There wasn't the slightest ripple in my heart. Not even the satisfaction of revenge. Only exhaustion. A deep, empty exhaustion. Shan Ruabing, I think you've misunderstood something. I stepped out from beneath the awning and let the rain fall across my coat. Standing above her, I looked down quietly. Do you really think I destroyed the Shan family because I still hated you? Because I couldn't let go of your betrayal? She stared at me, unable to answer. You're wrong. I crouched down until we were eye level. Her eyes were filled with desperate hope. Mine were completely calm. I destroyed the Shan family because it had become a cancer in Jiangcheng's business world. Shan Dihai's greed, Jin Ku's cruelty, and your arrogance. Even if I had never appeared, everything would still have fallen apart eventually. I simply made it happen sooner. I reached out and lightly touched the cheap, tarnished brooch pinned to the front of her wedding dress. And as for you, Did you really think wearing this dress would awaken some forgotten warmth inside me? Shan Ruabing, your obsession with power has crushed even your dignity. That's the thing I despise most. No, that's not true. I love you, Lin Xiao. I really do. She reached out desperately to grab the hem of my coat. I calmly stepped aside. Her fingers closed around empty air. Love. I let out a quiet laugh filled with ridicule. Shan Ruabing, you don't even know what love is. What you loved was the shadow, the man who tolerated everything, the husband who served you, the person who gave endlessly without asking for anything in return. But when you discovered that shadow was actually someone standing so high above you that you could never reach him, your love suddenly appeared. That's not love. That's regret. It's fear. It's the terror of losing something you never appreciated. I turned and walked toward the edge of the rooftop. A massive LED display stood there, waiting. Young master. Gu Qingyan stepped forward, holding a remote control. The video is ready. Play it. It's time. There's no reason to hide the truth anymore. The enormous screen lit up. The footage was from 3 years earlier. The study inside the Shan family's old mansion. It had been recorded the day before old Master Shan passed away. The video quality was blurry, but the old man's voice was perfectly clear. On the screen, old Master Shan held my hand tightly. His eyes were bright and completely lucid. There wasn't the slightest sign of confusion. Lin Xiao, I've wronged you. The old man sighed deeply. I know exactly who you are. You're the heir of the Xiaolong group. You hid your identity and came to Jiangcheng to investigate the truth behind your mother's car accident years ago. It was this old man who used the favor I once did for your father to force you to stay beside Ruabing. Shan Ruabing froze. She stared at the screen without even blinking. She had forgotten how to breathe. The old man continued. Ruabing was spoiled by me. She's proud. She looks down on everyone. But she has never learned how to judge a person's heart. I was afraid that after I died, someone like Jin Ku would eventually destroy her. Lin Xiao, I have only one request. Protect her for 3 years. Consider those 3 years repayment for the favor our family once did for yours. But after those 3 years, if she still hasn't learned, if you still choose to leave, then the Shan family deserves whatever fate awaits it. Don't blame yourself. It will simply be the road she chose. The video ended. The screen went dark. I turned around and looked at Shan Ruabing. Her face had lost every trace of color. Did you hear it clearly? I asked quietly. Those 3 years of marriage were nothing more than a transaction. I endured 3 years of humiliation. I protected the Shan family. Not because I loved them, but because I was repaying old Master Shan for saving my father's life. I saved you. I took care of you. I endured every insult from your family. Not because I was begging for your acceptance, but because I was honoring a promise. So the moment we walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, that promise ended. I no longer owe the Shan family anything, and I certainly don't owe you, Shan Ruabing, my love. So that's the truth. Shan Ruabing whispered blankly. She looked completely lost. The marriage she had always believed was built on gratitude turned out to be nothing more than a promise her grandfather had purchased with his own dignity. And under the protection of that promise, she had mercilessly trampled the only person who had ever truly protected her. Lin Xiao, I'm begging you. Just this once. She collapsed into the muddy rainwater. Her white wedding dress was now stained black. Even if there's no love left, for Grandpa's sake, please don't let my father go to prison. He's old. He won't survive it. I looked at her without emotion. I've already handed every piece of evidence of Shan Dihai's embezzlement, his illegal transfer of company funds, and his conspiracy with Jin Ku to the police. The law is fair, Shan Ruabing. You were once a police officer. You should understand that better than anyone. The Shan family owes Jiangcheng's investors. That debt must be repaid. And Shan Dihai owes the law. That debt must be repaid as well. I didn't look at her again. I simply turned and walked toward the rooftop exit. Lin Xiao. Her desperate scream echoed through the storm behind me. Do you really have to be this ruthless? I stopped walking, but I never turned around. Shan Ruabing. When a man's dignity has been trampled beyond its limit, revenge no longer needs mercy. You should actually be grateful. I only took away your future, your family's fortune, and everything you believed belonged to you. I didn't leave you lying helpless in the darkness. The way you left me after the car accident. I stepped into the elevator. As the doors slowly closed, I caught one last glimpse of Shan Ruabing. She sat alone on the rain-soaked rooftop, still wearing that worn-out wedding dress. Behind her stretched the glittering skyline of Jiangcheng. Yet against that brilliant backdrop, she looked like nothing more than a lonely ghost abandoned by time. On the first floor, the celebration officially began. I had changed into a tailored dark gold suit. As I stepped onto the stage, every eye in the hall turned toward me. Ladies and gentlemen, starting today, there will no longer be a Shan family or a Jin family. In Jiangcheng, the Jiangcheng branch of the Xiaolong Group will officially become the Xiaolong Global Strategic Center. Thunderous applause filled the hall. Uncle Su handed me a glass of champagne. I accepted it and looked toward the river outside. The storm over Jiangcheng had finally passed. But my own journey was only beginning. On my desk already waited challenge letters from several long-established international financial conglomerates. Compared to them, everything that had happened in Jiangcheng was only the beginning. Power, wealth, dignity, everything I had once lost, I had already reclaimed many times over. And everything I wanted from this moment forward, I would build with my own hands. As for Shan Ruabing, and those 3 years of marriage filled with the smell of cooking oil, silent humiliation, and broken promises, they could remain buried forever, in the mud of Jiangcheng, washed away by the rain. As I walked out of the hall, Uncle Su opened a black umbrella over my head. Young master, our next destination is London. The private jet is ready. I nodded. Let's go. I stepped into the Rolls-Royce. The window slowly rolled up. The windshield wipers swept away the last drops of rain from the glass. Ahead of me, the road was clear, bright, and wide open. The end.